what we get, but we get a life by what we give. And today we are here again, maybe after a lapse of a few years, to commemorate and celebrate an individual whose contribution still stands true and relevant even today. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone, members of the head table, distinguished invitees and all of you here today. Welcome to Dr. A.M.A. Azeez commemoration meeting and memorial oration. And my name is Azeez and I will be your host today. We have a great lineup of speakers today, but before we proceed, I'd like to invite Hafiz Maulana Rizwan, Imam of the Colombo Grand Mosque, to recite Qiraat and Dua.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. அன்பார்ந்த சகோதர சகோதரிகளே, அல்லாஹ் சுப்ஹானஹு வ தஆலா குர்ஆனிலே لئن شكرتم لأزيدنكم ولئن كفرتم إن عذابي لشديد. நீங்கள் நன்றி செலுத்தினால் உங்களுக்கு அதிகப்படுத்தி தருவோம் என அல்லாஹ் குர்ஆனில் சொல்கின்றார். அதன் அடிப்படையிலே நாங்கள் நினைவுபடுத்துவதற்காக வேண்டி டாக்டர் A.M.A. அசீஸ் என்ற மர்ஹூமாக இருக்கக்கூடிய அவர்களை ஞாபகப்படுத்துவதாக இந்த மஜ்லிஸ் ஏற்பாடு செய்யப்பட்டுள்ளது. எனவே அவர்களுக்காக வேண்டி துஆ பிரார்த்தனை செய்வதற்காக வேண்டி ஒன்று கூடியிருக்கின்றோம். எனவே அவர்களுடைய மகள் இட்டடியில் ஒரு மாத காலத்துக்குள் அவரும் அல்லாஹுடைய இறையணி இல்லத்தில் சேர்ந்து விட்டார்கள். அவரும் மர்ஹூமா மரீனா என்ற அந்த அவருடைய மகளுக்குமாக வேண்டி துஆ பிரார்த்தனை செய்துவிட்டு அல்லாஹுக்கு நன்றி உள்ளவர்களாக நாங்கள் ஆகிடுவோம். அவர்களை பற்றி நான் சொல்வதை விட நீங்கள் அதிகமாக அறிந்திருப்பீர்கள். எனவே அல்லாஹ் அவருடைய சேவைகளையும் அவருடைய அனைத்து நல்ல காரியங்களையும் அல்லாஹ் போற்றிக் கொள்வானாக. إلى حضرة سيدنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإلى مرحوم A.M.A. عزيز ومرحومة مريمة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه على كل حال حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وخطايانا كلها يا رب العالمين اللهم بارك لنا في رجب وشعبان وبلغنا رمضان اللهم اوصل ثواب ما قرأناه من كلامك العزيز هذه هدية واصلة ورحمة نازلة وبركة شاملة منا إلى رب سيدنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإلى روح مرحوم A.M.A عزيز ومرحومة ميمونة اللهم اغفر لهما وارحمهما وآخهما واعف عنهما وأكرم نزلهما ووسع مدخلهما واغسلهم بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقهم من الخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس اللهم اغفرهم دارا خيرا من دارهم وأهلا خيرا من أهلهم وزوجا خيرا من زوجهم وأدخلهم الجنة وعنهم من عذاب القبر وعذاب النار اللهم اجعل قبورهم روضا من رياض الجنان ولا تجعل قبورهم حفرا من حفر النيران ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون ربي رحمن يرحم العين سمياني يا الله إنه يعيد تقالي إليهم عند ربي يا الله إنه يقام لي منيت مريد الروايات தெரிந்தும் தெரியாமல் அறிந்தும் அறியாமல் செய்த பாவங்களை மன்னித்து மறைத்தருள்வாயாக எங்களை பெற்றெடுத்த பெற்றோருடைய பாவங்களை மன்னித்து மறைத்தருள்வாயாக உற்றார் உறவினர்கள் நண்பர்கள் நல்லவர்கள் தெரிந்தவர்கள் வாசிய சிறவர்கள் வாசிய கடமைப்பட்டவர்கள் அனைவருடைய பாவங்களை மன்னித்து மறைத்தருள்வாயாக யா அல்லாஹ் இந்த மஜ்லிஸை யாருக்காக கொண்டு கொண்டோமோ அவர்களை கபூல் செய்வாயாக அவருடைய சேவைகளை பொருந்திக் கொள்வாயாக யா அல்லாஹ் அந்த மர்ஹூம் A.M.A Azeez அவர்களுடைய கபரை வெளிச்சமுள்ள விசாலமுள்ள நல்ல கபராக ஆக்கியருள்வாயாக சுவர்க்கத்துடைய பூஞ்சோலை நல்ல ஆக்கியருள்வாயாக யா அல்லாஹ் சுவர்க்கத்துடைய ஜன்னத்துல் ஃபிர்தௌஸை சுவர்க்கத்தை அவர்களுக்கு கொடுத்தருள்வாயாக யா அல்லாஹ் அவர்களை கபூல் செய்வாயாக அவர்கள் சேவையை தொடர்ந்து நடத்தி கொண்டு போகக்கூடிய பாக்கியத்தை கொடுத்தருள்வாயாக யா அல்லாஹ் அதே போல இந்த விடயங்களை யாரெல்லாம் நடத்தி சொன்னார்களோ அவர்களை கபூல் செய்வாயாக யாரெல்லாம் உதவி செய்கின்றார்களோ அவர்களை கபூல் செய்வாயாக யா அல்லாஹ் அதே போல அவருடைய மகள் மர்ஹூமா மரீனா அவருடைய கபரை விசாலமுள்ள வெளிச்சமுள்ள நல்ல கபராக ஆக்கியருள்வாயாக அவருடைய குடும்பத்துக்கு பரக்கத்தும் ஆஃபியத்தும் நல்ல செழிப்பான வாழ்க்கையை உண்டாக்குவாயாக இந்த மஜ்லிஸை கபூல் செய்வாயாக அவர்களுக்காக என்னென்ன அளவுகள் நன்மைகள் செய்வோம் ரஹ்மானே அனைத்தையும் அவர்களுக்கு செய்து அவருடைய கபர்களை வெளிச்சமுள்ள நல்ல கபராக ஆக்கியருள்வாயாக எங்களை துஆவை கபூல் செய்வாயாக ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا صلى الله تعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين آمين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
I'd like to invite Mr. Khalid F. Farouk, President of the Dr. A.M.A Azeez Foundation, to deliver the opening address.
Respected Brahma, our guest speaker, Professor Raja, Lisa Mani, President of the World Learning Conference, Secretary Maika, Principal of the Arab from Karambo, His Excellency, the Ambassador for the Arab Republic of Egypt, and members of the diplomatic corps, Kali Azeez and members of Marhum Azeez family, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to you all. We are gathered here to commemorate the death anniversary of Dr. A.M.A. Azeez, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the memorial oration. Today we have in our midst a learned scholar, Professor M. Emeritus Professor of Law, National University of Singapore, who will be delivering the oration on the subject, the law in the speeches of Sheikh Azeez, the Muslim family of Ceylon, and its present significance. We are thankful to Professor Raja for accepting our invitation to deliver the keynote address. A.M.A. Azeez was the foremost Muslim education, having the distinction of being the first Muslim civil servant in Ceylon. Having excelled in the field of administration, Dr. Azeez took over as the principal of Zahir College, Colombo, from Dr. T. Jaya. During his stewardship, Zahir excelled in education, and flourished not only in the field of education, but also in sports and other extracurricular activities. Prompting a former Sri Lankan Prime Minister to describe Zahir as one of the greatest public schools in our country. He was also honored with nominated as Senator in the upper house of the Parliament. Among the many institutions established by Dr. Azeez, the All-Ceylon A.M.A. Conference and the Ceylon Muslim Scholarship Fund continue to illuminate the lives of the Muslim community. A.M.A. was his brainchild, and Marhum Naim enthusiastically accepted this thoughtful proposal and initiated this noble education initiative. Today, A.M.A. stands out as a leading higher education institution celebrating its 50 years of existence, producing eminent scholars and administrators. I thank also A.M.A. Conference for continually associating with Dr. A.M.A. Foundation to commemorate this annual event. I feel saddened to refer to a towering figure who is not with us this morning. It is Marhuma Madina, beloved daughter of Marhum Azeez and loving sister of our Azeez. Like father, like daughter. As much as Dr. Azeez was with the A.M.A., Marina was with the A.M.A. She was the founder secretary and later served as the president of the A.M.A., a position she held with honor and distinction. During her tenure as president of A.M.A., Marina spearheaded several programs and initiatives, and I am pleased to know that the A.M.A. currently is continuing to pursue programs to uplift community standards, providing public amenities and nurturing future generations. On a personal note, Marina was a good friend of mine, and I value the advice and counsel. I have just felt at this event amongst us today. May God Almighty, with His immense mercy, shower His compassion and forgiveness, and bless with the highest reward in the name of Jesus. I am also deeply bound to recall the services rendered by two of my predecessors, Dr. M.P. Furkan and Mr. S.S. Levy, both of whom are not with us anymore. They held the position of President of India Dr. A.M.A. Foundation with distinction, having presided over the many memorial operations in the past. We are also thankful that they were able to publish numerous books concerning the life and times of Marhum Azeez. May divine mercy be on all of them and bless them. I would also like to thank Mr. Malika, the principal, and the relevant staff of Zahir College, Colombo, for all assistance kindly extended to make this program meaningful. Finally, I sincerely thank you all for your kind presence and participation in this memorial occasion in doing the
Farooq can also pay tribute to the late Professor Khan and Marina Ismail. Next, we have an address by the National President of the All Ceylon A.M.A Conference, Mr. A.M.A. Mr. Hamid, I'd like to invite you to deliver the talk.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected donors, the guest speaker, Professor A.M.A. Mr. Arjun, President of Dr. A.M.A.'s Foundation, and Mr. Asif Shikri, the National General Secretary of the Conference, and the Principal of Hyderabad, Mr. Azeez, and Dr. A.M.A. Azeez, family member, son, Mr. Ali Azeez, and the family members of Mr. Ali Azeez, and the distinguished United States and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It gives me great pleasure on behalf of the All Ceylon Conference to welcome you to all annual Dr. A.M.A. Azeez Memorial Oration. Since the state business of Marhum A.M.A. Azeez, the All Ceylon Conference had been commemorated to death anniversary from the year 1975. The first commemoration function was held under the chairmanship of Mr. A.M.A. Hussain, district judge, with Mr. S.M. Hamadi as secretary. After the formation of the Dr. A.M.A. Azeez Foundation, the YMA collaborated with Dr. A.M.A. Azeez Foundation in organizing the memorial oration. This year, we are fortunate to have our midst learned scholar Professor M. Somraj as the guest speaker to deliver the Dr. A.M.A. Azeez Memorial Oration. We are very much pleased to welcome you, Professor M. Somraj. All are aware that Marhum Dr. A.M.A. Azeez was the founder of the All Ceylon A.M.A. Conference. In his honor, the organization was inaugurated to meet the new generation of men worthy of the highest traditions of Islam and capable of the highest deeds to serve his country in every branch of modern life. I was thankful to Dr. A.M.A. Azeez Foundation for organizing this memorial oration association with All Ceylon A.M.A. Conference. We will move forward with faith, unity, and discipline, and I thank you one and all for your presence on this occasion. Assalam.
So we now move to the much awaited and anticipated memorial oration, which will be delivered by Professor M. Soumaraja, Emeritus Professor of Law at the National University of Singapore. The oration will be on the topic, the law in the speeches of Senator Azeez, the Muslim Tamil leader of Ceylon, and its present significance. But before I invite our next speaker, I'd like to highlight a few points on his illustrious career as a legal professional. Professor Soumaraja is a distinguished old boy of Royal College, Colombo. He was in fact a classmate of my uncle Ali Azeez from the age of 5. So that's since 1947 to put things into perspective. He entered the University of Ceylon and graduated with LLB first class honours and served as a lecturer in the law faculty. He obtained his master's degree LLM at Yale Law School, LLM PhD and LLB at King's College, University of London. His book on the international law on foreign investment established him in this field. In 1986, he relocated to Singapore as Professor of Law at the National University of Singapore. He has been teaching law at universities in many other parts of the world. He built up a practice as a lawyer in international investment law and appeared for several states of the world, and in fact still works as an arbitrator in cases involving disputes between states and multinational companies. Professor Swarnaraja is a leading academic in his field and has excelled in his profession internationally. So let me stop there at his achievements. Otherwise, Professor, I'll be here delivering another oration. But I want to tell all of you that a printed copy of the full oration, along with Professor Swarnaraja's achievements, will be available at the end of the program. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor Swarnaraja to deliver the memorial oration today.
In the last few months, when I was preparing for this lecture, I wondered why I should have been given this opportunity of lecturing, giving this oration before such a distinguished audience. The only answer I could come up was just disclosed by the content for this oration. It was that I was a classmate of Ali from the time Ali, the son of Senator Azeez, from the time they were both 5-year-old pupils at the Royal Primary School. So that being the reason for it, and it's such a slim reason, I begin this oration. Ali was my classmate at a time when Muslim students could have chosen to study in English, Sinhalese or Tamil. But his father had required that he study in the Tamil medium. Senator Azeez was then, of course, a leading Tamil scholar, recognized as one of the great orators in Tamil. And it was a welcome fact that Ali, along with his cousin, Ismat Rahim, should have been my classmates from the time I was 5 years old. And the solitary reason I am here before you, delivering a lecture commemorating the life of a great Muslim Tamil leader is due to the fact that I began my education as a fellow pupil of Muhammad Ali, the son of Senator Azeez. There were many distinguished classmates of ours at that time. There was Sri Swarnaraja, the son of the Supreme Court, judge of the Supreme Court of Ceylon at that time. There was Raghunadan, the son of the general manager of the Bank of Ceylon. There was Kanuri Pillai, the son of the professor of Tamil at the University of Ceylon. There was Mailagan, the son of the professor of physics, and the list is a large one. And of course, there was the son of Senator Azeez as well. My father was a mid-level civil servant, and he chose from amongst all these illustrious men that my model should be Senator Azeez. For the simple reason that Senator Azeez was, like my father, a definite animal, that he was a product of, like my father, a Hindu college in Jaffna, and that he was the leading speaker, an orator and scholar in Tamil, a man who had written extensively in Tamil, producing virtually a book a year in the Tamil language, the winner of a Sahitya Award for Tamil literature for his book on Islam in Ceylon. So I had a distinguished model, and that model which guided my life from early times was Senator A.M.A. Azeez. And I take great pride today in delivering an oration in his memory. And the subject that I have chosen is law in the speeches of Senator Azeez. Now, the choice, of course, is a natural one because I am a lawyer, and as it was explained to you, I have taught law in Australia, in Singapore, and other areas of the world. I have practiced law as well. So it was a bit natural, and perhaps given my understanding of the law, that I should have chosen this subject today, law in the speeches of Senator Azeez. Now, a senator is a lawgiver. We do not have a senate in Sri Lanka now, but the British, in their constitution, the Sovereign Constitution, which they drafted for Ceylon, thought in terms of two chambers of parliament. One was the House of Representatives, as in England, and the other was the Senate. The legislation that was passed by the House of Representatives had to be passed also in the Senate, which did not consist of elected members, but of appointed members, appointed on the basis of their wisdom, their extensive knowledge of their different disciplines, and of course the fact that they were accepted by the general community as leaders of their respective professions. So it was natural that Senator Azeez should have been in this esteemed chamber of very distinguished people who made the law of Ceylon at that time. Recently we have a member of parliament, Mr. Sumandran, lamenting that the members of the House of Representatives, the members of the present parliament, do not have the sufficient literacy to understand the laws that they were making. This was simply not so when it came to the Senate. The rot may have started in the early 1950s, but the Senate stood outside the rot that was taking place, in that it consisted of very eminent persons, and the leader amongst these eminent persons was certainly Senator Azeez, as his speeches would indicate. As a lawgiver, one must accept that the experiences that shape the life of the lawgiver are important in assessing the nature of the law that he contributes to, and the attitudes that he would take in supporting a particular legal instrument that has to be accepted by him. So, though in the English law it is often said that the life of the law is logic, the contrary is the case as far as American lawyers are concerned. The life of the law, a famous American judge, Oliver Wendell Holmes, put it, is not logic but experience. One who makes law, or who practices law, or who has anything to do with law is guided by his experiences rather than by logic. And it is that experience that shapes the law. So in understanding the law, the attitudes of a lawgiver like Senator Azeez, it is necessary that one must understand the experiences that shape him. Senator Azeez was born in Jaffna, in Vanapane, not Punti, Vanapane, which is very close to the center of Jaffna town. So he was born in 1911, and his first school was the Jaffna Mohammedan School, at which he studied the Quran. Later he moved to a school that was run by the Ramakrishna Mission, the Vaidishwara College at Vanapane. when he was around 10 years old. And he was at Vaisheshwara College for 3 years. And his daughter, greatly missed today, has spoken about, or has quoted his father as having said this relating to the period he spent at the Vaisheshwara College, or Vaisheshwara Vidyalaya in Jaffna. And these are the words that are quoted as having been made by Senator Azeez. He said, I now feel thrice blessed that I did go to the Vidyalaya and nowhere else. My period of stay, February 1921 to June 1923, though pretty short quantitatively, was extremely long qualitatively. It was at the Vidyalaya that I first became acquainted with the devotional hymns of exquisite beauty and exceeding piety for which Tamil is so famed through the ages and throughout the world. So his early life was shaped to a large extent by the experiences he had at this school in Varnapalli, the Vaisheshwara College, which exists to this day, and because it is situated in the largely Muslim quarters of Jaffna, which have been depleted because of the leading of the Muslims on that area, still consists of a large cohort of Muslim students. So after studying at Vaisheshwara College, Senator Azeez studied at the Jaffna Hindu College, and here again he came into contact with the different Tamil and cultural practices of the people of Jaffna. Again, there was a large cohort of Muslim students studying at the Jaffna Hindu College. So the experiences that Senator Azeez had in his formative years was steeped in the culture and the traditions of the people of Jaffna, which of course made him a Jaffna Tamil Muslim. And hence my title that he was a Muslim Tamil leader, or a Tamil Muslim leader, whichever way you want to put it. He was very much rooted in the culture of the people of Jaffna. I would like us now to make two comments. One relates to the fascination of Senator Azeez with what is referred to as Arabic Tamil. Arabic Tamil or Arabic Tamil is something that fascinated me when I started reading about Senator Azeez. It is something which I had not heard about before, that there was a distinct language called Arabic Tamil, and that the uncle of Senator Azeez, Asana Yente Ali Pudar, was a distinguished authority on Arabic Tamil and had contributed tremendously to the literature of Arabic Tamil. Azeez himself has written an article on Arabic Tamil that is referred to as Arabic Tamil and Albert Tamil. So he had a general feeling for this language that was written in Arabic, with new words introduced into the Arabic to denote consonants that did not exist in Arabic. So it had a distinct script in the sense that though the original Arabic script was used, it also had certain letters that had to be introduced so as to signify the pronunciation that was necessary to speak Tamil. So it was Tamil that was written in an Arabic script that was modified to suit the needs of the speakers of Arabic Tamil. Now, going back to something that is known as the gallstone, it has nothing to do with the human body, but an obelisk that the widow Cheng Ho had brought to Sri Lanka and put up at Goa. So it's referred to as the gallstone. Cheng Ho was a Chinese admiral who came along what is now referred to as the Marine Silk Road, the Silk Road that goes on a maritime route. And the route is now defined by the Chinese as involving the route that Cheng Ho had taken in the early 15th century. So Cheng Ho came to Sri Lanka in 1409 and put up this gallstone in the city of Goa. And it had three languages, Chinese of course, because that was the language of Cheng Ho, Tamil, and the third language was thought to be Persian or Arabic. But modern scholars say that the third language was what is known as Arwi, A-R-W-I, or Arabic Tamil. And that Arwi or Arabic Tamil was the language of commerce that was spoken by people on the trade route between South India, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Sri Lanka, and into Southeast Asia. So Arabic Tamil then was an extensive language that involved not only Sri Lanka but captured a whole region extending from South India to Southeast Asia, which signifies that the presence of the Muslim community in Sri Lanka started well before 1409 when the Gaul obelisk was established by Cheng Ho. This is significant because of the fact that the supremacist theories would say that some of the people of Sri Lanka, which is a plural society, are relative newcomers, and that their right to exist in this country is therefore subject to a certain amount of doubt. But that is not really so, because there have been so many communities which have come to establish themselves in Sri Lanka from very early times. I move on to a second factor, the fascination that Senator Azeez had with the Ramayana. It's a very strange thing that this Muslim scholar, so steeped in the Islamic tradition, having a father who was a well-known Islamic figure in the politics of Jaffna, having an uncle like A.M.A, who was a well-known Islamic scholar, was still interested in the Ramayana. And he traces his interest in the Ramayana to the dates in which he studied it as a prescribed text for his school levels. The teacher he mentions was Ponnambalam teacher from Kokuvel, who taught Tamil at the Jaffna Hindu College. So his fascination then became early. It started early. And thereafter, when he was a government agent in the Eastern Province, he came across what was known as Terukutu, or state theatre, which really embodied the Ramayana stories. The Terukutu is a unique form of theatrical performances that the people in the Eastern Province undertook. So his fascination for the Ramayana can also be traced to his interest in the performance of Peruku. Thereafter, he read a paper at the Tamil conference that was held in Malaysia, and there again the Tamil conferences were held by a Catholic priest called Xavier Thaninagam, who was a particular friend of Senator Azeez. And the paper that he read at this conference was on the influence of Ramayana in Malaysia and Indonesia, two Islamic countries. So if you look at the dance forms in Indonesia, you would find that they are particularly influenced by the story of the Ramayana. And that the story itself had undergone an Islamic twist, very much like how the Ramayana had undergone a Tamil twist when Kamban wrote it in Tamil. So there is an Islamic version of the Ramayana in Indonesia, in the sense that it has been Islamized in accordance with the culture of that country. So the manner in which this was done constituted the basis of the paper that Senator Azeez delivered before the conference in Malaysia. The learning in Tamil of Senator Azeez was very extensive. And as I said earlier, he spent a lot of time writing in Tamil, producing many articles which are all recorded in a very important book by Dr. Nagia, whom I met this morning. Azeezum Tamil is a book that Dr. Nagia wrote, which describes the extent of the contribution that Senator Azeez made to Tamil literature. The associations he had formed, like his friendship with Swami Vivekananda, who was the principal of Sivananda Vidyalaya in Bangalore. Senator Azeez was government agent in the Bangalore district. So he had this close association with Vivekananda Adigal, who was the principal of Sivananda Vidyalaya in Bangalore, and later the first professor of Tamil at the University of Ceylon. So this connection then between Senator Azeez and this Swami was a close one, which led to several projects involving the translation of Tamil, of many works into Tamil. I now go on to the main thrust of my paper, my oration, the contribution of Senator Azeez to the formation of legal principles. I have chosen just 3 subjects in an extensive record of speeches. The speeches have been brought together in a volume that was edited by Muhammad Ali, the son of Senator Azeez, along with his associates. And I have chosen just 3 topics in order to illustrate the nature of the contributions that Senator Azeez has made. Senator Azeez started his role as a senator in 1952, when Ali and I were just about 10 years old. And he ended it in 1921, when we were just about to graduate. So he had a long innings at the Senate, spanning over a decade. And he made many speeches, like, for example, highlighting the Bauhaus Ordinance, which was of particular interest to the Islamic religious community. But I speak of just 3 areas. One is attitude towards capital punishment. 2 his contribution to the discussion of the early legislation on bribery, and 3, his participation in a very significant way in the manner in which the senior-only bill was introduced into Sri Lanka. First, capital punishment. Senator Azeez was opposed to capital punishment. He said that it was a barbarous form of punishment which should be totally abolished. The bill, however, only wanted to suspend capital punishment, not to abolish it. But Senator Azeez's firm conviction was that the sanctity of life was so basic to all religions that the state should not be able to take human life. So he supported the total abolition of capital punishment, though at the time he made this argument, only some 36 countries had abolished capital punishment. Today there are 113 countries which have totally abolished capital punishment, and along with Sri Lanka, some 28 countries which have suspended the punishment. So though it remains on the statute book, and it remains as a possibility under our constitution, capital punishment, though imposed, is never exacted by the state. So to that extent then, a certain progress has been made in Sri Lanka. But of course that progress is very illusory, because as everyone knows, extrajudicial killings in this country, sometimes inspired by the state, have become very common. And of course, as long as there are extrajudicial killings that take place, the fact that that capital punishment is abolished is of little significance. Then of course, recently we have the phenomenon of pardons being given by presidents for people who have been condemned as killers. So recently we have also the Supreme Court decision in which the pardon that was given to Domingo de Silva was challenged. And the Supreme Court very boldly said that the giving of a pardon to Domingo Silva would be illegitimate because of the fact that procedures that were necessary for the giving of such pardons had not been followed by the President. The giving of a pardon would have required that there should be consent from the Attorney General, from the judge who imposed that punishment, as well as from other officials. So these requirements had not been complied with, and the Supreme Court therefore held that the conferment of the pardon was improper. I would say that even if such consents had been obtained, the court would have the right to inquire into whether those consents were properly given, whether there were valid reasons as to why the Attorney General or the presiding judge had a cause to give his consent for the pardon to be exercised. The royal pardon is the progenitor of the pardon of the President in Sri Lanka. In the case of the English King, a pardon is given only on the recommendation of the Prime Minister in circumstances where there is a situation where the evidence was not properly appreciated by the jury, or where there is a public understanding that the offender had undergone sufficient punishment, or where that person is so terminally ill that it would be an act of kindness, or considered an act of kindness, that he should be released. So when President pardons offender, certainly it is a tremendous step to take And it is not in accordance with the manner in which the royal prerogative has been exercised, the exercise of which is the forerunner of the presidential pardon, that such a pardon should be given. So we have the situation where President Sirisena also pardoned atrocious offender, as President Rajapaksa did, the pardoning of a man called Ratnayaka, who was responsible for the massacre of 8 civilians in Minnesota. President Sirisena pardoned Atte Nansar, the leader of the Padupala Sena, who instigated violence against minority communities. So these pardons that are given are called questionable pardons, and they go against the preservation of the sanctity of life, because these were men who had taken life in most atrocious circumstances, and the idea that they should be pardoned for political reasons sits very uneasily with the purposes that animated Senator Azeez in suggesting that there should be an abolition of capital punishment. He certainly did not contemplate the issuance of pardon or the idea that there would be no accountability for extrajudicial killings that take place in this country. Second, I go to deal with bribery. Again, we see Senator Azeez taking a very firm stance against bribery from very early times. So in a speech he makes in 1954, he points out that in a young democracy like ours, it is very essential that all possible steps should be taken against bribery and accusations of bribery. So this was at a time when bribery had not become a major issue in our country. Thereafter, of course, it has become a huge issue that undermined the very economic structure of this country. Senator Azeez's position in 1954 was that there should be strong legislation enacted on bribery, and that there should be a special machinery set up in order to ensure that bribery is suppressed. This was not done, and it's very strange to read that debate, that there were senators who opposed what Senator Azeez said on the ground that it would be a violation of human rights to deal with people who were accused of taking bribes in the manner that was suggested by Senator Azeez. The fact that there was such a soft attitude that was taken to bribery in early times, despite the caution and the caution that Senator Azeez had indicated, is the beginning of the incidents that led to the present economic crisis, where we find that much of the wealth of the state has been stolen by the politicians and by the administrators. Now, one also must make reference to the fact that modern law has progressed in such a way that it is easy to recover the proceeds of bribery that have been taken from Sri Lanka into other countries. There is a procedure which is virtually free, that is offered by the World Bank for the tracing of assets that have been taken out of the country. The Pentagon Papers, for example, indicate how some of the politicians or associates of the politicians have taken assets out of the country and located them in banks outside Sri Lanka. The procedure to pursue them is indicated in many of the programs of financial institutions by the World Bank and by governments of Switzerland and the United States. They volunteer to offer their services to developing countries as well as to other countries which have been affected by bribery. Again, as in the case of extrajudicial killings, the notion of accountability is something that is totally lacking in our country, despite the fact that mechanisms exist for recovering the proceeds of bribery that have been taken out of the country, and according to statistics, these amount to several billions of dollars. Despite the fact that so much of money has been taken out, and despite the fact that our procedures for ensuring that this money is returned, there has been no effort at all that has been taken to recover the proceeds of such bribery. Countries like Nigeria have succeeded in bringing back the wealth that was taken out of their countries by dictators. So there is very little reason why similar efforts should not be done in Sri Lanka. And of course, as I said, these efforts could be made without any effort, any monetary expense by the government of Sri Lanka. There is unwillingness to do this simply because of the fact that accountability runs pretty deep and would affect a large number of people at the very top. So that is a sad fact that we have to deal with, that bribery goes on, that the laws in Sri Lanka are very sufficient. There is a bribery commissioner, there is a law under which the bribery commissioner could operate, but despite the existence of such laws, activity in this area, the pursuit of accountability in this area is totally lacking. Now I go to the third area which I want to cover, and I shall start with that. But this area is a long one because it is an area of great significance to us, and it is an area, the effects of which we continue to suffer. The singular bill was produced before the Senate in the regime during the rule of Prime Minister Solomon West Dynasty, an unlikely person to make Sinhala an official language in 24 hours. He had wanted federalism at one stage for Italian areas, but he had a change of mind, and he knew that the way to power was through populism. One speaks about populism in modern times. They say that Trump was a populist, and that he used populism in order to become the President of the United States. But that's old hat for us. It's simply because we know that populism was used way back in the 1950s in order to ensure the rise of Mr. Bandaranaike to power in making Sinhala only the sole of official language of Sri Lanka. Senator Azeez has this to say. He said that the official languages bill, he characterized the official languages bill as the shortest bill ever introduced into Parliament, but fraught with the gravest of consequences. Shortest bill ever introduced, fraught with the gravest of consequences. Consequences that will outlast the present generation. Right? So here are prophetic words. The idea that it was the shortest bill makes Sinhala only the sole official language of Sri Lanka within 24 hours, fraught with the greatest consequences, consequences with which we still live. And it didn't last just the generation of Azeez, it didn't last just the generation of his son and me, it will last several generations to come. On that, perhaps Senator Azeez was wrong in saying that it will last a generation. is going to last several generations to come. The shortest bill with the greatest consequences lasting several generations to come. And he also made the statement that he was a democratic socialist in response to the idea that this was the age of the common man, right? It was the justification for introducing the single-only bill, that he was bringing in the age of the common man. The response of Senator Azeez was that he was a democratic socialist, that he stood for the common man, and that this bill will not hurt the common man at all. Again, property dwells because of the fact that the Sinhalese community itself made itself unable to accommodate new knowledge that was available outside that one language. Generations of Sinhalese students and Tamil students too were educated in the local language, making new technologies unavailable to them, bringing about a new class of people who could not be major achievers within society or major contributors to the economy of the society. So these are prophetic statements that Senator Azeez made quite early at the stage where the bill was introduced in 1956. At that time, of course, the Oslo Muslim Congress and the Oslo Moors Association required the support of the bill. They required that the singular-only bill be supported. And of course, Senator Azeez was the Muslim member of the Senate, the sole Muslim member of the Senate. And it was incumbent on him, perhaps, to support the single-only bill. The two associations that represented the Muslim community required that the bill, the single-only bill, be supported with the proviso that there be made recognition of Tamil and English, due recognition be given to these two languages, Tamil and English, and that fundamental rights of the minorities in respect of religion, culture, language are incorporated in the Constitution. So these were the requirements of the two Muslim associations, the Moors Association and the Muslim Congress, Muslim League. They wanted the incorporation, they wanted due recognition to be given to Tamil and English, and that there be recognized a set of fundamental human rights. So there was a constraint on Senator Azeez to accept the single-only bill, because the two associations that were seen as representing the Muslim community accepted the single-only bill. But as I say in my paper that you have, I think that there was an internal conflict that Senator Azeez underwent. He thought that it was an unfair thing that was being done to the Tamil-speaking peoples of the time, that Tamil should be given equal status as Sinhalese. So there was an inner conflict that took place, I would suggest, in the mind of Senator Azeez, which is reflected in his speeches, as I shall demonstrate. The word federalism in his paper, in his speech. Senator Azeez points out that there could be situations in which federalism should be accepted in Sri Lanka or in Ceylon at that time. He said that if it is found to be a constitutional device available when all efforts have failed and all remedies have been denied to prevent, then as a final matter, I would appreciate the federal principle and subscribe to it. So here's a clear statement that he makes, that federalism might be a solution to be advanced. In circumstances where there are no other avenues of accommodating the interests of the Tamil-speaking peoples. So that much is clear, and I would argue, as I have argued in my written paper, that international law, after Senator Azeez had made his speech, has moved towards the idea that this has expounded in his speech and recognized that federalism, or what is referred to as internal self-determination, may be a solution in those circumstances in which a minority is driven to such an extreme that it has no alternative other than to ask for internal self-determination. He talks about secession as well. I would not want to go into it because it's an offense to talk about it now. It was not an offense in the time of Senator Azeez, but he does contemplate in his speech the possibility of having being recognized in a distinct state. Now you will find that this idea of federalism was challenged before the Supreme Court long after Senator Azeez had made his statement in a case called Chandra versus Senati Raja. The Federal Party first had this idea of federalism. That was the very heart and rationale for the formation of the Federal Party. The Federal Party, of course, in Tamil is the Inangai Tamil Kachi, which means, of course, that there should be heavy rule. But as far as English is concerned, the root of the ideas of the Federal Party are to be found in this notion of federalism. Now, in this case, Chandra versus Senati Raja, the issue was brought by Chandra the plaintiff, saying that the Federal Party was unconstitutional because it advocated secession, that federalism was something resembling the idea of seceding, and that therefore it was contrary to Article 6. The Constitution of the Federal Party very significantly says that the Tamils should have an autonomous region for themselves. And in addition, it also goes on to say that Muslims should have an autonomous region for themselves. So this is a very strange idea because it's a sort of an innovation that was introduced later into the Constitution of the Federal Party in order to possibly curry favor with the Islamic community, which the Tamil movements like the LTT had alienated in the past. So it creates a new formulation that there should be autonomy for the Tamil-speaking people and autonomy for Muslims in territories in which they are the major community. In other words, for Muslims living in A.M.A, which is a part of the northern province, and in places like Kalmane, where the Muslims form a majority, where they are in control of territory, those territories must be regarded as autonomous territories. The constitution of the Federal Party is summarized in the judgment of Chief Justice Bianca Depp in this case, indicating that both the Tamils as well as the Muslims will be entitled to have autonomous regions in which they can have self-governance. So one must then conclude that this idea of there being different Tamil-speaking peoples, an idea that you find articulated in the speeches of Senator Azeez, has been approved by the Supreme Court because of its approval that the Constitution of the Federal Party that embodies this idea of an autonomous region for Tamil-speaking Muslims being accepted as valid under the present Constitution. So that is a sort of a change that has taken place in the law of Sri Lanka, which was foreshadowed in the speeches of Senator Azeez. The idea that there are different Tamil-speaking peoples, that the people of, shall we say, the Muslims of the eastern region are a different people, though they speak Tamil, and that's the sentence in Senator Azeez's speech puts it. These people love Tamil greatly, but they love their religion more. Right? So this is a nice sentence in the speech of Senator Azeez, where they love Tamil greatly, but they love their religion more. So that gives a separate identity to these people and a right to these people to have a separate autonomous region for themselves in areas in which they form a dominant community. Senator Azeez also spoke of democracy, and again this is property, because he said that democracy doesn't mean ruled by the majority. Right? I mean, we all think of democracy, define democracy as being ruled by the majority. He pointed out that it should be ruled by the peoples of the country. Peoples meaning that this is a plural society in which there are Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists and others. And that the rule should be by all these different religious and linguistic groups, rather than ruled by a majority. The establishment of a hegemony of a single race is something that is to be adhered in the thinking of Senator Azeez. Democracy, the fault of democracy, simply is that it permits the rule by the majority. And then the British thought that they were doing a great thing by giving democracy to Sri Lanka. They were doing a disservice to the minorities in that they did not foresee the idea of rule by a majority in the guise of a democracy. And what has happened now is that we have a rule by the majority and not a rule by the peoples of Sri Lanka, the plural community that exists and forms this country. Again, we come to human rights. I mean, here there is a criticism I have to make, both of the Ceylon Moor Association and the following of that idea by Senator Azeez. Senator Azeez thought that, said of course, that Article 29, which guarantees minority rights, and was thought of as the Magna Carta of the minorities, was a fallacy, because the majority, a two-third majority, formed by the major single community can defeat the aim of Article 29. So he thought that if you had a code of human rights, it could solve the problem. It did not solve the problem. So we have a case called the noise pollution case, which was really between two mosques, the Kapuatta Mahidin Juma Mosque and the Jamia Rahima Mosque. One mosque complaining against the other mosque that the use of loudspeakers would create noise pollution and must be prevented. Now, first, that was argued not as a point of Islamic law, but as a point of human rights relating to the freedom of expression, the right to sort of propagate your religious message. And of course, the counter-argument was that this caused noise pollution, disturbed public order. So the result was that the suspension of the permit to use loudspeakers by the Kapuatta Mahidin Juma Mosque, which was made by a Muslim superintendent of police on that area, the suspension of it was approved by the court. But it did not stop the Buddhist priests, saying that this judgment was a judgment against the Buddhist priests using loudspeakers to stop the chanting of killing. So it became the case, which really was a dispute between two mosques, became a case which was dressed up as a case in which the Muslims were trying to stop killing being chanted over the loudspeaker, and this resulted in violent episodes. So this notion of human rights then, I think, is suspect, because human rights can be different persons. This noise pollution case being an instance of it. So the question then is that we do have a situation in which the existence of human rights, and we see that the present constitution does have a profusion of human rights, all nicely laid out, but the constitution also says that fundamental importance must be given to a single religion, which undermines the whole thrust of the present constitution. Senator Azeez also spoke about the economic effects of the Single ODF. He pointed out that the economic effects of this legislation would result in the downward slope, the climb down of the economy of Sri Lanka to its depths. And it's a prediction that has come true now. The fact that the A.M.A may talk in terms of statistics, it might talk in terms of numbers, it might give loans, but the essential root of the economic downturn is the fact that important business communities in this country cannot conduct business without, given the fact that there is a climate of hostility that is engineered against their interests. This again is a factor that Senator Azeez had identified in early times. He had also pointed out, and this is the final point that I would make, and it is a very, very important one, in which he says that the democratic form of our society will be undermined, and that there would be a march towards authoritarianism that would take place if present circumstances are to continue. So we find that taking place today, that society has become more authoritarian as far as this idea of the supremacy of a single race advanced. As long as there is populism, there would be always the supremacy of a single religion or a single ethnic community. And in the context of that populism, you will find a rise of right-wing dictatorships. You find that taking place in Hungary, in the United States under Trump, perhaps in Brexit in the United Kingdom. We do find the rise of the right-wing in circumstances where there is ethnocratic government that is put in place. And what we find now is then there is a decline towards tyranny. As my fellow Latin scholar would say, Azeez descensus averno, easy is the descent to hell. And our descent into dictatorship has been an easy one, a facile one, which has taken place quite steadily over the years. And it is not impossible to see that there would be a dictatorship of the military, which Senator Azeez alluded to in his speech on the single-only bill that is recorded in the Hansard. So, I have spoken extensively, I have spoken about the three circumstances of the areas of three areas of the law affected by the speeches of Senator Azeez. And I have suggested that these attitudes that he took were rooted in his life as a Tamil Muslim, who drew sustenance from ideas that existed in his religion, the Islamic religion, the tradition of which is rooted as far as the law is concerned in the Holy Quran, preached by God through the Prophet Muhammad, hallowed be his name. He preached and recorded in the Hadith and explained in the different texts of the scholars on the subject. Likewise, Hindu law, unlike English law, like Islamic law, is rooted in the notion of Dharma, the idea of goodness. I would say that these matters animated the speeches of Senator Azeez, the positions that he took on the various aspects of the law. The height of a Tamil person is to be what is known as a sandron. A sandron is a person who fearlessly takes positions in life, who brings his wisdom to bear on many acts, who sacrifices his life as his life and power. His life in power, as Senator Azeez did when he gave up his high position as a government agent to become the principal of Zaira College and nurture this institution into great heights. So such a person is in the vision of the Tamil people a sandron. A sandron is a person to be respected. And whatever the Tamil says in his Quran, that a mother would be greatly thrilled to hear his son being spoken of as a sandron than at the time when he was born. So I have had the privilege today to speak of such a man of greatness who affected the life of the law of this country. And of course, much of the ill winds that had blown over our country would not have done so if he had heeded the wisdom that he had given us at that time. I appreciate you for the honor that has been done to be able to speak of this great man today. Thank you very much.